Super Rugby weekend games, folks. We've got 4 games on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. We're going to go through some lineups, some predictions and stats, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how these games may play out. Last game for a few teams. 4 teams will be playing their last game of the season, and then the rest will go into the playoffs. I mean, most of the spots are kind of more or less decided. It's just where they finish up. We'll start with the first game, the Chiefs and the Drua. Last game of the season for the Drua. They've had 2 wins this year. Which is maybe more than some people expected them to get, especially when they haven't had many games in Fiji. But this game is in Fiji. We've seen them play once against the Highlanders in Fiji, and it was fantastic. So we're in Lautoka for this one, so it's a different ground. But I'm sure they'll get some fantastic support, and it should be quite a spectacle because you could argue that game against the Highlanders visually was, and like with the atmosphere, was the best game we've had in Super Rugby this year. There's been a few others, but that's certainly, you could argue, one of the best ones. The Chiefs, they are 9-4, so pretty good record. They are just behind the Brumbies and just ahead of the Hurricanes, so they certainly want to get a win to push themselves as high up as they can. In all likelihood, they won't catch the Brumbies because the Brumbies will be favourites against Moana Pasifika. Can't take anything for granted, but they will also want to try and keep themselves ahead of the Hurricanes. So it's an important game for the Chiefs. Either way, the Drua have brought in WARvBLU at 13, which is good news because that guy is a real handful. REBvHIG moves to 12, and I think REBvHIG and WARvBLU have been probably, can I say, the best midfield that we've seen from the Drua in 2022. Taylor is back to his more usual 10. Lomani's in at 9. And you got that man Habosi on the left wing. So there's a lot to like about the way the Drua are lining up. The Solve and Tamani have come in at 7 and 6 with Rarasea in the locks. Hetet is getting a start up from the bench this week. So also Dolakoto is down to the bench, but still is a loose forward rather than a hooker. So a bit of tinkering, but this has got to be getting close to the best lineup from the Drua, but they have rotated pretty much the entire season. So if nothing else, they have built a lot of depth. A lot of these guys have got experience at the Super Rugby level. For the Chiefs, they've brought back Brodie Retallick, which is a bit of good news because he's been out with a broken thumb for quite some time. Otherwise, the lineup is fairly stable with no Sam Kane, him being injured. Soakula moves to 8. Luke Jacobson moves to 7. And Finau moves from the locks into number 6. And with Brodie Retallick back, that's kind of good timing. Tokiaho gets a start this week. Nankivell moves out to the wing to accommodate Pohipi, who's in at 13. So yeah, a bit of tinkering for the Chiefs as well. Not a kind of whole lot in way of personnel changes, but positional changes for the Chiefs. Stats-wise, the Chiefs, best line out in the game equally, actually. Most offloads, they're a fun team to watch. I would say the Hurricanes have maybe got a bit on them, but also the Drua, because the Drua kicked the least. They got among the most run meters per carry, but they do have the worst line out. Easily the worst line out. If there's one thing the Drua need to get right for next year, it's their line out. So, yeah. We'll see how things go, folks. The bookies are saying Chiefs. Chiefs by 17, according to the bookies, and 13 according to the algorithm. I would say the Fiji factor may make it a bit closer than that, but you never know. Like I said, the Chiefs need to get a win to finish as high as they can to ensure their spot is as at least kind of 4th. But yeah, we'll kind of wait and see. Moana Pasifika and the Brumbies. This one's from Mount Smart. So the Brumbies, like I mentioned, are on 44 points. They are behind the Crusaders, who are on 48. Unless the Crusaders lose to the Reds tonight, then the Brumbies won't be able to pass them. And the Chiefs on 41 are just kind of behind the Brumbies. So equally, this is an important game for them. Moana Pasifika, obviously, this is their last game of the season. So they'll be wanting to put their best foot forward to give their fans something to cheer about. But if nothing else, they've not gone through the season winless. They have picked up the 1 win, and it's been a disrupted season, about as disrupted seasons can go, right? With so many games in quick succession. Remember, a lot of these guys are backing up after having played on Tuesday, which is something the Brumbies don't have to worry about. So they have made a bunch of changes. Kata is in on the wing. I'm glad to see him on the wing for a change. Tava Nawai has been a proper unit. He's on the other wing. So that's among the most blockbusting, ball-carrying wing combos you will get in any team. Lydia Whānau's back at 10. Taumatene is in at 9. Time Stowers is in at 8. Funaki is in at 6. And I think Stowers and Funaki have been probably the 2 best Lucies for Moana Pasifika this season. Curry, Kepu, Niuia and Pole are in at 4, 3, 2, and 1 respectively. So yeah, man, it's a bunch of changes. It's needed. These guys played a few days ago, so they have to change the lineup, or somebody tell the Force that, because the Force didn't bother. But anyway, yeah, it's a much changed Moana Pasifika side. And they'll be up against it, man, because the Brumbies will be smarting after losing 2 games in a row at home. They're away at Mount Smart. They've kept their lineup relatively stable. Banks, Wright, and Muirhead are the outside backs. Nick White and Lolosio at 9-10, so pretty familiar. McInerney comes in at hooker. Jerome Brown comes in at 7. But otherwise, man, it's Nick Frost is getting a start this week. But yeah, it's pretty steady as she goes, so a bit of consistency. Moana Pacifica's line-out is also pretty poor. Statistically, I think it's the second worst in the comp. But they love offloading, man. They got the second most offloads to only the Chiefs. So they're also a fun team to watch if you like a bit of razzle-dazzle, as Justin Marshall would say. The Brumbies, they do have the most mauls per game. That's just their stat. But I say it every week when I talk about the Brumbies. They can hit you with more than just the maul, although you wouldn't know it to look at the game last week against the Blues. It was their maul that was their best weapon. But like their run meters per carry numbers are awesome. Like these guys genuinely are a threat in multiple areas of the park. So yeah, Brumbies 19 points with the bookies and 17 points with the algorithm, picked to get an away win at Mount Smart this weekend. The next one, the Waratahs and the Blues from Leichhardt Oval. The Blues are guaranteed top spot. And they've made a bunch of changes. They've rested a heap of players. They're saying it's not disrespectful. I think the Blues missed out on a bye because of the COVID thing, right? So a bunch of the Blues' big names are not playing in this one. So the Waratahs, if they weren't already kind of picked to run the Blues pretty close, will be picked to do so now, because this is a way changed Blues side. The Waratahs are on 37 points, so just behind the Canes on 38 and just ahead of the Reds on 35. The Reds, we will know their result first, but they're playing the Crusaders away, so tough job. So the Waratahs should finish at least 6th, and if they get a win, they could go even higher, but it depends. If the Hurricanes get a win, Chiefs get a win, Brumbies get a win, then it's all probably just going to stay the same. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, as I said, there's certainly incentives for the Waratahs to try and beat this much changed Blue side. Not that they wouldn't not want to beat them. You know what I mean. Jed Holloway comes into the 23. Ned Hannigan also starts this week after impressing from the bench last week. He seemed a bit bulkier, or is that just me? Charlie Gamble, who's been good all season, is alongside Michael Hooper. So that's a lot of tackles between those two gentlemen, 6 and 7. But otherwise, man, the squad is pretty much the same. Angus Bell gets a start this week instead of being on the bench, but still Tane Edmed, who's been good. Jake Gordon's been great at 9. Nawini Tawase is on the wing. So, yeah, man, it's a very stable looking Tars side. Whereas the Blues, Ratumaitavuki Nitkins is in, Dan Sullivan's in, Tua is in, Evans, AJ Lamb, Jock McKenzie, Tame Plumtree, Jordan Lay, Josh Goodhue. All these guys were outside the 23 last week. That's a bunch of changes. Choate gets a start. Riccatelli gets a start. Laulala gets a start. Romano gets a start. All those guys were on the bench last week. So this is about as an inexperienced Blues side as you've seen in a long time. So yeah, it's there's going to be very little cohesion between these guys. But sometimes you give guys a chance to put their hand up and they'll do it. Waratahs concede still too many penalties, but every other aspect of their game looks pretty good. They got lots of passing, lots of run meters, lots of mauls. They're a good balance team, lots of clean breaks. Their clean break numbers are really awesome, so there's lots to like about this Tars side. They didn't get a win over the Highlanders last week by accident. And the Blues, second most clean breaks only to the Hurricanes. They also maul it a lot. The Blues have got more than one aspect to their game. But as I said, those stats are all from a different Blues team than the one you can see lined up this weekend. So the bookies have actually got the Waratahs by 1. I would imagine taking into account the Blues changes, whereas the algorithm, which doesn't look at selections, says the Blues by 8. The last game, which is still on Saturday, it's going to be a busy Saturday if you guys want to watch all the games. Like New Zealand time, it's like 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9:45, midnight, and then one on Sunday. So it's a busy day. In Perth, potentially the last game of the season for the Force. It'll depend on what happens with the Highlanders, but ultimately the Force need to win. They are on 19 points. The Highlanders are on 22. So if the Force can get a win, they'll pass the Highlanders, but the Highlanders have still got the game in hand. So the Highlanders have still got control their own destiny. But the Force have every reason to win, because otherwise they're essentially out. And they haven't made any changes as far as I'm aware. Unless whoever was listening to the lineups just copied and pasted last week's lineup, as far as I'm aware, that's the exact same team that played on Tuesday, which seems nuts. Surely these guys, having played in New Zealand last week and then flying all the way back to Perth, will be a bit knackered. I don't know, man. Pryor, Pasitoa. Pasitoa probably had his best game I've ever seen him play for the Force last week. Kahui's, at 12. McIntyre. Lee Warner, potentially his last game for the Force. Tim Anstey was good, so same dudes as last week. Hurricanes, not so much. Dan Coles is back in. Olmua's also back in on the bench, so 2 new hookers in the side. Both those guys have had really disruptive season. TK Howden's in at 8, but otherwise pretty stable. Rayasi is still there on the wing. Geordie Barrett's still at 12, and he had a pretty good shift. He's starting to look more comfortable at 12A. He's always had that background in him, but we're seeing him get a crack at Super Rugby level. Pretty stable side. I would say the 2 most stable lineups of the weekend between the 2 of them. For goal kicking, the Force have now moved to the second lowest side. At a point in this season, they were up top, but they're missing a few too many. They interestingly have the most passes among the AU teams, the Australian teams, but their run meters are still kind of low. So it feels like a bunch of shoveling and grinding, but their clean break numbers are actually really good. And Manasa Mateele is a big part of that. And he is on the left wing for the Force this week, so look out for him. The Hurricanes got the most clean breaks, most defenders beaten, the fewest mauls, I think, of the New Zealand teams. These guys are also a fun team to watch. So if you're willing to stay up to midnight New Zealand time, this should be a pretty good one. Otherwise, you guys in Perth will be treated, hopefully, to a bit of a spectacle. But either way, the Hurricanes are favourites. 15 points with the bookies, 14 points with the algorithm. And the last one, the Rebels and the Highlanders. So the Highlanders, like I said, they need to win to ensure their survival, their playoff spot, but they will know what they need to do after seeing the Force in the Hurricanes game. If the Hurricanes can do them a favour, they can just go this one and kind of relax and just enjoy themselves, because they can't finish any better than 8th, and the worst they can finish I think is 9th, so it'll just depend. The Rebels, last game of the season for them, they're on 16 points. They can't catch the Highlanders on 22 points, so 6 points behind. It's insurmountable for them. So it is the last game of the season. They'll want to go out with a bang at home. Rob Leota moves to number 8 this week. Josh Canham comes in the second row. Front row still the same: Gibbon, Ulysses, and Pa'amusili. Ripley, who got a hat-trick last week, is on the wing. Reece Hodge is back after going off last week, so he's at fullback. So good that he's made a good recovery. Ross Haylett-Petty is into the 23 on the bench. For the Highlanders, they've made a few wee tinkering changes. Well, I remember Marty Banks had to come in at 10 because there was a red card last week, so Marty Banks is having to fill that spot. Coombs Family moves to fullback from the bench. Gregory moves to the right wing. The midfield's still the same. Bryn Evans comes in the second row. Muck and Leo comes in at hooker. De Groot is back into the 23 at loose head. I would say with the Hurricanes being favourites, the Highlanders probably will know that they are 8th. But as I said, the Force guys are going to be fired up. So whether the Canes do them a big favour, we'll just have to wait and see. The Highlanders, 7-point favourites with the bookies and 6-point favourites with the algorithm. The Rebels, man, they concede the most clean breaks. They have the worst tackling percentage. Defensively, they've just been a bit of an atrocious outfit, actually, this year. But strangely enough, I still do think they've gotten better towards the end of the season. It's a pity there's not a couple more weeks where they could maybe prove us a little bit more in that, but such is the nature of the season. The Highlanders, actually, their tackle percentage is not great either. So this could be a pretty open one if neither side defends that well. And the Highlanders do kick the ball a fair bit. So, yeah, should be an interesting weekend of games, folks. As I said, a lot of games on Saturday. Clear your schedule because there's a lot of rugby on. But, you guys let me know your thoughts. Do you think all the favourites are going to win? Because for the most part, these are games with teams who are in the playoffs against out of the playoffs, barring the Waratahs and Blues. And the Blues have put in such a changed outfit that who really knows how that one is going to go. Anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I will talk to you guys again soon. See you later.